It's all good. It was very it was what was needed. It wasn't the hero we wanted, it was the hero we needed. Tip of the tongue, teeth in the lips.
You just let us know when you're ready, Vanessa.
We are live. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right. We are back. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Supply Chain Solutions Weekly Ship Show. Today's July 12th, 2022, and this is episode number 27 in our weekly educational series that keeps you informed of the changing market conditions as we strive to provide the hand-holding and the attention to detail that our clients value in a time of global supply chain disruption and inflation. And as always, it's my pleasure to welcome back my Ship Show co-host, Jason Brand, our Director of Business Development, who joins me each week on our show. And finally, my name is Anthony D'Ambrosio. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Supply Chain Solutions, the company that understands now more than ever that the flow of the information is as important as the flow of the freight. And lastly, we'd like to thank our magic maker, our Director of Marketing, Vanessa Fry, for producing today's show. So folks, this week, it's all about the FMR, the Freight Market Roundup. So let's dive right into the market conditions. But before we do, let's just pause again for the people of Ukraine as they struggle for their freedom. Thank you, everyone. Well, Jason, why don't you take it away and take us into the FMR?
Hey, first of all, thank you so much, as always, Anthony. Fantastic introduction, always butters me right up, makes me feel nice and warm inside. And honestly, thank you all for joining us again today. I missed you guys. It is great to get a chance to just dive into what's going on, what rates we're seeing with a purpose that we can share with you guys, and also hear what you guys are, interested in, what is affecting you. But I think it's important to preface all this with the fact that a lot has been happening in the freight market. And just to reiterate, the goal of these FMRs, it's a quick screenshot of the market in general. It's going to go from ocean to air, diesel price averages, spot rate averages, and we try to sprinkle in a few things happening in current events that we're keeping our eyes on. But, in and out, 20 minutes, give you what you need, and make sure what you're paying and what you're doing is in line with the market. And if it's not, you obviously have some great people here you can touch base with. But without further ado, let's start from the top down. Let's take a look at our ocean rate averages. So first and foremost, our China to US West Coast lane, it's actually sitting at a year-to-date low at the moment. It's coming in at roughly $7,400 for the ocean portion. And despite the greater congestion in the eastern ports, the China to US East Coast lane is also down to a record low of $9,800 as well. So the rates in these lanes have actually been in a free fall since roughly the beginning of May, when we actually saw our West Coast lane averages sitting at around $15,000 and our East Coast lane averages sitting at around $17,000. And what's interesting about this is definitely not what many supply chain professionals were expecting. And I'm very fascinated by all the factors influencing this right now. I think it'd be great for us to take a deep dive, and I'd love to take you guys along with me and Anthony on what's happening in this lane and what levers are affecting these really massive changes. But that'll be for a later date. But back to my point, and to add to kind of what we're seeing there in those West Coast Trans-Pacific lanes, we're also seeing the rates for exports steadily climb as well. So ocean averages for containers heading from the US West Coast to China have climbed by roughly 33% in the past month. And that's now putting the average at $1,000. If you're looking at East Coast exports to China, they've spiked, but at a slightly slower rate, roughly a 20% increase. And now the current average is around $900. Now, let's switch gears. Let's take a little focused look at the Atlantic side. It's not seeing the same stabilization trends that we're seeing on the West Coast. Now, the averages have been falling, but they're still very close to the lane's all-time high prices right now. And we're looking at roughly for the ocean portion average of around $8,000. So this is going to be your imports from Europe. And if you recall, it's slightly above the rate's old all-time high. So back in 2020, back in 2021, this rate peaked at a rate of $7,500. Now, what's interesting about this $8,000 point and what I mentioned earlier about the trend coming slightly downwards is if you take a hard look at just the past month, you see a different story. It's actually almost plateauing, if not slightly trending upward. We actually saw in the second week of June an astronomical increase in this rate, and it was sitting at an average of over $9,000. Figuring that 7,500 was four times higher actually than the high rate of 2019, considering a $9,000 rate is just impossible to stomach. From a percent increase, that's unbelievable. Now, flipping gears, while the imports from Europe have been seeing that opposite trend that the Trans-Pacific lanes have been enjoying, the exports, they're showing that same stabilization effect. And actually rates increasing over the 1 month period at a much higher rate than we're seeing if you're looking at the Trans-Pacific lanes. So back in the first week of June, exports were sitting at roughly $450 a container, but right now exports at around $700 a container. So definitely a pretty substantial change. Let's flip slides.
And Jay, real quick,
Yeah.
Before we go on to the next slide, just a couple of quick comments that I want to make real quick on some of that Asia to the US. Just a few notes that I had been that I'd made that I've been watching for the last week or so. I think everyone needs to understand that, you know, as Jason said, the market volumes, you know, continue to drop. The rates are dropping a little bit. Ningbo continues to be congested. You know, the LCL warehouse queues are improving now that the truck drivers are getting a little bit more efficiency in their COVID testing, because in China, all of these truck drivers that are going in between provinces need to have this 24-hour nucleic acid report test that gives them this green travel code that they have to have, like a QR code on their phones, and they need to sometimes apply for this 1 day in advance. And you know, in the port of Xiamen, the cargo volume is weak right now in Xiamen. You know, so we're still not seeing any increases. And again, the prices have been lowered. In Dalian, the freight, again, as Jason mentioned, continues to trend downward. The steamship lines have basically adopted a strategy of suspending shipping and skipping ports to maintain a rotation, a balanced rotation in the strings and the vessel strings, but also try to protect our market share on the rate. And again, in Dalian, where our New Jersey operation has a lot of break bulk cargo coming out of, those drivers need a 48-hour nucleic acid test for COVID testing. And then just real quick to you know, finish it up, in Qingdao, the space continues to be abundant, but carriers are giving us the caveat that you know, space is subject to roll, and there's a lot of bad weather in Qingdao right now, and ships have been delayed like about 3 to 7 days, almost a week now. Some ships have been delayed in berthing because of the weather, because some of the flooding, and many of the LCL warehouses are still having really bad congestion. And then you know, we're seeing an issue pop up again in Shanghai, where the rates again continue to fall, as Jason mentioned, but they're having a big outbreak again of COVID in Shanghai, which may cause the you know, a drop in the volume of goods. And then lastly, just a couple other quick places in the Asia Pacific Rim. You know, in Thailand, The port of Lem Chabang, which is the main ocean port in Thailand, is in the third phase and phase 3 of their terminal development project, which has really added a lot more infrastructure to that port, which is one of Asia's major gateways. And the hope is that this new infrastructure project is going to improve the container throughput capacity and expand their network of the domestic connections that they have by both rail and barge. And they actually are digitalizing their operations, which Jason and I talked about a month ago, about how the industry is hyper accelerated into this digitalization and how it's changing, and they expect to have that completed by the end of 2024. And then lastly, in Vietnam, there's been a lot of vessel cancellations over the last couple of weeks because of the port congestion, and there's been a lot of rollovers in the transshipment. So we're in peak season now, and Vietnam's having some issues. So Jay, I'm sorry for interjecting. I just wanted to put a couple quick notes in there about that.
No, hey, couple fantastic notes, some great detail. No, that was fantastic.
Back to you.
I appreciate it. You kidding me? So let's see here. So gonna discuss this, and honestly, really a great segue to this slide as well, right? Because we're still talking about Asia, but now we're talking about Asia to Europe. And this lane is, and I love to say this, it's the busiest lane in the world. All of those events that Anthony discussed, a lot of these ships hit a lot of those ports before they make it over to Europe. So anything happening in one of these ports changes the vessel rotation. It can change your rate. It can change your availability. It's all connected, and it can all get so complicated, especially if you're, the fifth stop. But looking at that environment, so the rates for Asia to Europe have been remarkably stable. And it is actually the most stable lane, without a doubt, in the entire world. And it's been that way for about 3 months. So we've seen rates sitting at around 10,400 to 10,500 between Asia and Europe. And they've just stayed put. There's a slight trend downward, but it's even hard to call it a trend because it's such a small decrease we're seeing. And also with everything going on in Europe and also in Asia, it's hard to make a prediction on this lane because, at any moment, something pretty drastic could occur. And it'd be very, very challenging to say, hey, where are we seeing this in the next 6 months, especially after we're seeing this rate stabilization over the last 3 months. Now, I want to talk about the Indian market a little bit. The rates have been trending downwards. There's actually a couple interesting things that came out recently as there's been, you're starting to analyze some of the data over the past year. So their fiscal year 2022 ending in June, compared to the previous fiscal year period, they had a 43% increase in exports. And that's fantastic. And also what we're seeing is we've had so many troubles with this over the course of the past few years, but container availability, port of loading emissions, it can just be a really challenging environment to have a scheduled shipping process to get it out of. But we're seeing all that start to improve. And on top of that, with the new container availability, which was a huge thorn by itself. I mean, there were all these programs that were happening in the region just to help with container availability in India because they were so imbalanced between exports and imports. But just with all of that improvement, that's fantastic. And one article I read has said that they are seeing rates going down by as much as 15%. It's kind of hard to say though with India, honestly, and Anthony, I'm sure you can add to this as well. We've been able to maintain some pretty good rates compared to the market, but then occasionally we go for a one-off spot shipment and it just feels like it's a different region we're shipping from. How do you feel about that, Anthony?
No, I totally agree. And I think one of the biggest problems that everyone has in India right now is getting into container depots to pick up containers to load. And having, Supply Chain Solutions has a tremendous footprint in India, whether it's Delhi or Trivandrum or Hyderabad or Bombay or Calcutta. Nava Sheva, which is one of their main ocean ports, we're moving a lot of freight out of India into the EU and into the United States. And that container repositioning is a real big fly in the ointment as we move into India. But I think it's all about your relationships in a local environment. And again, Supply Chain Solutions has some of the best relationships around the world in a local environment. So India is an area where we really shine at. So I agree with your assertions earlier, Jason. Perfect.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so couple other things I want to mention before we move on. So things going on. I've got to keep everybody's eyes on this, and you've got to pay close attention to this, but these are these ILWU, the West Coast Longshoremen Labor Union talks. So if you recall, this contract was supposed to be, well, it expired on July 1st. It was supposed to be negotiated and, either an extension put in place or a new contract put in place by July 1st. But that did not happen. What did happen is we got a statement from each side about a couple hours before July 1st. And it essentially said, hey, we don't have an extension, we don't have a contract in place, but don't worry. And specifically what they said were normal port operations will continue, and we are on the path for, getting an agreement signed. Optimistic people close to the negotiations have said that they're on the right track, and they should be able to get an agreement signed by at the latest September, at the earliest August. But my main problem with this whole situation is these negotiations have never been peaceful. And in a situation where the ILWU really has all the cards in their hand, I mean, if they decided to do a slowdown, it'd be astronomical. I mean, it'd be a very bad situation. I find it difficult that these will be peaceful. Now, I do know we've had a lot of government interference in these talks, so that could be adding to maybe this sense of everything's going relatively smoothly. But there still is a lot of big things on the table. I mean, the ports of LA and Long Beach have been trying to automate for years, and that's the number one no-no for the ILWU. There's even talk of, if they do automate, a tax being essentially levied on any containers that were automated or any automated terminals, which, if you're already looking at high container rates and then we're automating, and then you're looking at now new taxes because you're dealing with an automated terminal, it'd be interesting to see where that goes in the long term. But it's something you got to keep your eyes on very closely. And, as this develops, we're going to have to probably say a couple cents on it each week just to keep you guys in the loop if anything major is happening on it. But, as you keep your eyes on this, you could also look to Germany, because what's happening there is, kind of like maybe a shot over the bow, you could put it, for what could be happening here in the West Coast. So they are currently on a 48-hour strike, and it's in 3 of the busiest ports in Germany right now, and that's including Hamburg. And if you dive into what's going on, this is not the first strike. They're calling it a warning strike, a 48-hour strike. It's going to be ending on Saturday at 6 p.m. But this is I don't remember the number, but there's been several 24-hour strikes in the past month, and it is essentially a wages dispute. So the dock workers union wants to include an immediate 14% wage increase and put in a part of the contract that would essentially match inflation. So if inflation goes up, that would also bring wages up for the dock workers. And this is a collective agreement. So it's between 58 different ports that this agreement's being negotiated. The port employers have offered a 12.5% wage increase, but they're going to do that over 2 years. And obviously the labor union wants that 14% right now. So it is pretty tense. This has been happening for a while. It is heating up. And, as we just went over, the European import rates have been, right now we're seeing that as the rate that's going up, while the rest are going down or stabilizing. So it is something to definitely keep your eyes on.
And Jason, real quick, just one last point. Great feedback on that about Germany. I mean, as Jason mentioned, this was their 6th round of talks, as Jason mentioned just a few moments ago. And the German union, which is called Verdi, represents over 12,000 port workers, and the Central Association of the German Seaport Companies is also involved in that. And as Jason said, there's no deal. But I want to tell you, this is a bad situation. The congestion that we're seeing in Bremerhaven and Hamburg, and Wilhelmshaven, which is another one of their main ocean ports, is really, really bad. And this is going to have a really bad effect throughout Europe. Supply Chain Solutions has a tremendous amount of business that comes out of Germany, and we are already re-engineering and taking steps to avert this, because this is a bad thing that's going on in Germany right now, and I think it's going to also spread out into the EU, into some of these other countries. Speaking to my partner in Italy just yesterday, they already had a strike yesterday in the ports of Genoa and La Spezia, what they like to call a wildcat strike, for these same kind of reasons. So Jason, apologies for interrupting, but again, back to you, my friend.
No, Anthony, no, that's please, just step right in. You kidding me? Yeah. So, and honestly, let's flip over to air. That's a great point to end on, because these labor talks going on right now. It's obviously a really challenging time. I mean, thankfully we're seeing the West Coast rates like fall slightly, and also some of the congestion is not nearly as bad as it used to be, which is very thankful, especially as we're entering, the beginnings of peak season here. It's right on the horizon. But still, this is going to be very defining for the next 6 months at as an immediate kind of reaction. But yeah, Vanessa, let's flip over to air. So I'll go through some air rate trends that we're seeing right now. But you can see that, for the most part, capacity is available. But let's start with Asia. So if you are shipping from China to the US East Coast, you should expect rates to be roughly around $10.90 a kilo. If you're shipping from China to the central US, expect to see the highest rates. Actually, if you're shipping into the US, they should be around $12.80 a kilo. And if you're shipping from China into the West Coast, expect to see rates at roughly $11.60. Now, for Europe, we're looking at very different rates. The highest rates you should be paying coming out of Europe via air should be around $4.10 a kilo. And then that's going to be if you're shipping into the central US, and expect to see your lowest rates when shipping air out of Europe right now at roughly $3 a kilo when shipping into the West Coast from Europe. Finally, looking at just South America to North America, you should expect to pay the least if you're shipping into the East Coast. The average cost right now is around $4.40 a kilo, and expect to pay the most when shipping into the central US, and that's around $7.25 a kilo. Anthony, anything you want to add on that?
No, you're right on the money, Jay, as always.
Cool. And I want to discuss fuel real quick. So diesel averages, what's going on right now? Diesel across the US averaging roughly $5.56 a gallon. It's down 10 cents from a week ago, but it is up still $2.23 from last year. The most expensive fuel in the nation will always be in California, and right now that average is at $6.67 a gallon. But our second most expensive location for fuel is in Washington State, which is $5.94 a gallon, again, on average. The cheapest location for fuel is in a region called PADD3, PADD3. It's actually just a petroleum district. They have the most refineries, so it does tend to lend itself to cheaper fuel. But they're sitting around $5.20 a gallon, which is substantially cheaper for diesel than the average, and obviously California as well. PADD3 includes some states like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, not Florida as a note, but it is called the Gulf region. And that's what I got for you today.
Well, I just have one other thing that I do want to add real quick that I think it's important for us to touch on. I think everyone needs to also be aware about the California Truck Owner and Operators protest, the AB5 in Los Angeles and Long Beach that's going on right now. And basically, it's a result of really an ongoing legal challenge which prevented AB5 from going into effect in January of 2020. And the law stems from the California Supreme Court's decision against a particular company, which we won't name right now, that was like a package and document delivery company. And the court found that this company had misclassified its delivery drivers as independent contractors, okay, rather than employees, and that basically they said that all California-based companies that use independent contractors have to follow this ABC test, this three-pronged test to determine whether the worker is an employee. So I think essentially what's happened is many truckers in Southern California who move containers in and out of the marine terminals in the ports of LA and Long Beach did a work stoppage yesterday to protest this controversial law that limits the use of independent contractors and largely classifies them as employee drivers. This is a case that went to the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's back in there again. And again, this is something to watch closely. It is a major issue. And, there's over 75 owner-operator companies that are affected by this right now. So as Jason said about things going on in trucking and in the West Coast, this is another thing that we are keeping our finger on the pulse of. So I just wanted to add that real quick.
That was fantastic, Anthony.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I said on the chat, we have a quiet audience today. I don't see any questions in the queue, so I'm going to leave at this. And if you have any questions that you can think of later, here are Jason's and Anthony's email addresses. Other than that, I'll see you guys next week. And thank you so much, Jason and Anthony, for all your time.
Thank you, Vanessa, and make it a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye now.